So I was kind of thrown off by a pretty major detail that makes it challenging for me to preach this weekend, and that I am like totally a blind guide. I wore my glasses first and foremost to prove this. Normally I'm rocking contacts. I have a negative 6.5 or negative 7 prescription, which I don't really know what that means, other than if I take these off, I no longer can see anyone's faces. I see colors and things kind of blurring together. I see vague movement maybe in the first 2 pews, and then after that, it's gone. To the extent where I kind of have like a little sweet spot where if I pull my hand that close, that's where I can make out the detail of my palm. But the problem is if I pull closer, I lose it again right there, I would say. So really, like, this is my sweet spot right there where I can actually see without the aid of glasses or contacts. In some way, it's actually kind of nice because I have less stage fright right now. I have no clue who's out there. So I'm quite literally, maybe not legally blind, but I would certainly lead us all in a pit if we're going hiking like this. But truthfully, spiritually blind as well. In every given week, I probably stumble through most, if not all, of the 7 deadly sins. I have my temptations, my struggles. I'm still figuring this out. I have some degree of, I guess, moral authority from my education, but I'm still trying to live this alongside you. And there's this spiritual blindness that really, I think we all tend to struggle from, much with the same kind of case as my hand. We have this far-sightedness where we really struggle to get the full picture the further out it goes. People who are far from us. Maybe there's a little sweet spot kind of right here of people who are super close to us. Spouses are certainly meant to challenge and push each other towards heaven. Very good friends are called to that same thing, parents and kids. That's probably a different homily. There is some sort of spot where we are called to enter into that pushing each other towards heaven. But as we start to get further out, we lose vision. Already I've lost clarity, and I can kind of make out maybe in some ways who you might are, or details if I know you well, but I don't have the full picture. The details are missing. It becomes this blur. And that's where we get into this spiritual blindness of judgment and comparison and gossip and condemnation. The things that are called out in Scripture, the classic line, we can keep our mouth shut and people might think that we are a fool, or we can open our mouth and prove it to them right away. We open our mouth, and all this stuff comes out from situations that we just truly do not fully understand. We might get a glimpse of who they are, a glimpse of their virtue or of their sin, their vice, but we don't know the story behind that. We don't know what's going on in the hearts of people far from us. We lose our vision. We also tend to have this spiritual blindness when things get too close. We at some point in our life maybe recognize or catch our different spiritual blind spots, but we start to get used to them. We start to normalize our own sin, our own vices as like, oh, this is just kind of the normal stuff. I don't have to pay too much attention to it. We start to become blind to our own call towards virtue in our life and just kind of start floating through spiritually. We have this spiritual farsightedness and this spiritual nearsightedness. And so we're wandering in this sort of spiritual blindness, struggling to interact with each other. And that's before we even get to this whole thing of the wooden beam, in our eye. Jesus introduces this concept in the gospel. Each one of us is wounded by sin, by ourselves, by others, by the gunk of the world. We have this shrapnel that pierces into us spiritually, our spiritual vision. And we start to wander around or try to cope with it or manage it. And we all start kind of swinging around these beams, smacking them into each other, creating this confrontation, re-wounding each other through our own brokenness. We start to see and to live out of that sin and brokenness and woundedness rather than living out of the gift of Jesus Christ. And we start to make decisions out of our fear and anxiety instead of making them out of this place of confidence and hope and trust. We start to correct each other out of anger or bitterness and resentment instead of correcting each other out of a genuine affirmation and concern for each other. And we start to look out and see each other and see the world and see ourselves with this disgust born from our own woundedness instead of looking out with the eyes of Christ, with mercy and with love. We find ourselves in this spiritual blindness and woundedness. So we know that we must be healed. The question is, how do we go on that journey of healing? Well, I think back to when I was in second or third grade and I started to strain and not be able to read things on the board anymore, when I was starting to encounter that blurriness or cloudiness in my eyes. I could tell, people around me could tell, my teachers, my classmates, my parents. And so, all right, he needs healing. He's encountered something he can no longer see the way that he used to. And so the solution to healing was not, kind of me and my parents saying like, other people are blinder than you are, so kind of just, it's not that big of a deal. We'll kind of move on like this. It isn't, me as a kid trying to fix my own eyes, although there were times where I'd try and like stretch them in different ways to kind of get a better picture. It's like, no, you're struggling to see, go to an eye doctor. And so I would go and enter in and have the machines and the lenses and the eye exams to diagnose. And the same is true for our spiritual blindness. There are always going to be these temptations, first to comparison. Like, my spiritual blindness is not as bad as this person or that person. Maybe I can live with this or cope with this. There's always going to be this temptation to, maybe there's some way that I can fix it myself. I can dislodge this wooden beam from my own eye. I can hone my vision through my own power and strength as an individual. But no, the readings invite us that if we are spiritually blind, we must go to the divine healer that is Jesus Christ. We must go to him and allow him to do what is needed to restore us to healthy sight. And so this is my challenge for us in the next couple of days. We've got like 2.5 days before Lent starts with Ash Wednesday. And I would challenge each one of us in that time, make an appointment with your divine optometrist. Make time in conversation with Jesus Christ to sit down and allow him to do a spiritual eye examination with you. And there's certain ways we know this is going to work. First and foremost, we know that everybody who walks into the eye doctor doesn't get the same pair of glasses and it's fixed. His solution to healing, the way in which he wants to bring his life or his grace into yours, is going to be personalized. It's going to be precise. Your healing is going to look different than the healing of the person sitting next to you. You have your own unique blind spots, and so it's going to be something personal to you. We know that going to the eye doctor, it's always kind of born from this conversation. You sit down, and they put the big kind of shield over your face. I don't know what it's called, and it's, all right, is it 1 or 2, or 2 or 3, or 3 or 1? Now 1 or 4, and you're working with them like, it's okay, that's better. Like, okay, those are about the same. Like, okay, yeah, I think this is working. It's born in this conversation with Jesus Christ in prayer. Lord, how do you desire to heal me? Truthfully, he knows. The optometrist needs to do more work and learn from us, but he desires to pull from our own heart. What are we looking for? What are we striving to see? How are we seeking to be healed? So it's going to be personal and precise. It's going to be through this conversation, often repetitive conversation with Jesus Christ. And then, kind of wrapping up your appointment and going home, oftentimes the eye doctor would say, like, listen, you got to maybe work on avoiding some occasions of eye strain. Don't sit too close to the TV. Stop staring at your phone all day. Get away from screens. Don't stare at the sun. There's these different things that harm our ability to see clearly. In the same way, Jesus is going to offer some advice. There are certain things that are enabling you to spiritually see more poorly, and there's going to be certain things that are going to enable you to spiritually see more clearly. Are we moving away from certain things and moving towards others? So it's a conversation that's going to involve moving away from certain things. And then it's going to be this constant relationship through our life. As our vision changes, as things happen, as we practice some of those things our eye doctor told us to do or don't practice those things, we go back. Our prescription changes at different points in our life. We develop new blind spots or new challenges as we go through. And so we continue to check back in with Jesus, continuing to allow him to do his healing work in our heart. As we move into this Lenten season, make that appointment with Jesus, the divine optometrist. Allow him to provide his personalized prescription for you. Maybe it means moving away from certain things. Maybe it means moving toward some spiritual practices. He's going to offer something personal and intimate to you, and it's going to be through this constant communication. Whatever he offers, take his advice. He is the expert on this spiritual journey. So that after we journey through those 40 days ahead, we might be arriving on Easter Sunday with the ability to clearly see the glory of the resurrection in our own life with 2020 vision.